Okay. Good evening. This is the Rutland Town Planning Commission. It's April 20th of 2023. Welcome, everyone, and let's please start the meeting with a pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. So approval of the agenda is top of order of things to do.
So I move that we put the agenda. Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No public comment tonight. No new business, right, Bill, unless anything else has come across that transom. And so we'll move down to old business, and we wanted to make sure that everyone had a copy of the latest draft. Have there been any changes, Bill, since our last meeting?
I don't think so.
Okay. So we're definitely on for May 11th. The word has gotten out there and is getting out there. There was a story in the Rutland Herald. It's on the town's website, Facebook page, Front Porch Forum. Channel 3 CAX wants to do a story, and they've set up an interviews in early May. So yeah, I think people know it's out there. We'll keep putting the word out as we go forward. One thing that I think might be helpful, as definitely during the meeting and probably prior to also release as, one of our communications is a frequently asked questions, a list. And so I wanted to kind of play that FAQ game tonight with everyone. There've been a number of comments on our Facebook page that could, that probably belong in an FAQ. And anything else that you have heard or from reading the draft, anything that you think should be part of this. So it'll be probably a couple pages of answering some of the questions you already have and others that we think people may have during the hearing or may want to know prior to it. So, one of them is, what is the legal, rationale for something this, where do we get the legal status? And there's been a number of others. So I thought I'd just go down the list that I have. Let's add anything else that occurs to you folks. And we'll put together this FAQ and put it on the website if there's still room. If the guy can help us. and we'll put it other places. So I'll just go in order as they've come through in the Facebook post. One of the first ones was, why are we doing this? We aren't Killington.
What does that matter?
So as we go down this list, should this be one of the frequently asked questions? There's questions and there's answers. A question, answer, question. So it just, it's a couple pages of that.
My only comment on the question that was asked is, why are we doing this? We're not Killington. What town we are is irrelevant. The answer, you ask the question, why are we doing this? We answer the question. I'm just thinking that a question like that is somewhat confrontational and combative, and I would drop anything out of a question that we feel is either politically or emotionally charged or motivated, because those are irrelevant. and it's just to, I don't know, stir up controversy. And
Right.
I'd like to avoid that.
Right. So maybe we can rephrase that question. Isn't an ordinance like this, typically for resort towns or something like that? Because I think there is some value in explaining why this ordinance is good for just a regular old town like Rutland Town. I think this is an opportunity for us to make that point.
Mhm.
Well, the example is, we know of a number of dwellings within the town that are rentable via Airbnb. We
Yeah.
know that it's happening here, and we want to do something about it before it becomes an issue.
And it's
Consistency.
maybe even more of an issue because we're not a seasonal town of rent, of, condominiums. We're a town of neighborhoods.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Something like that?
I mean, that's a response to the question, I guess, rather than the question, but.
Yeah.
Is,
To make sure that it's done right to protect all the neighbors and people in town. I mean,
Right.
it's just,
we
Right.
have one of the things here, the purpose, some of those answers may be here in
In the purpose. Yeah, I would agree with it. And I think that, I don't know, did everybody get a copy of this? I just
Yes.
tried to read through this, and this basically asks some very good questions.
Yeah,
And
we'll
it-
get
and
to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, very simply, that the approach taken here is something that outlines a lot of the interests that people have been asking. So that can serve as
I
Some
think,
guidance.
one of the things, I've been trying to look at this thing from the average taxpayer's viewpoint. And being in town government for a few years, I learned that, when things are going relatively smooth and well in town and financially sound, the taxpayers have a tendency not to pay too much attention to what's going on. And I think once this ordinance gets to a point where it's made public document, we're gonna have some questions as to, the first thing that came to mind is, why does it have to be as many pages as it is?
Mhm.
And I'm sure there's explanations for that because it's all written in here.
Mhm.
But these are the kinds of things that taxpayers are going to ask us.
Right, right. Okay,
And I think we need to be prepared.
yeah. And that's part of this exercise too, is kind of preparing us
Right.
for the questions we have received and ones that maybe we think we might get during the meeting. So maybe oh, hi, Andy.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I couldn't get in on time. My computers down here are just running super slow tonight. It took me about 8 minutes to get on, to get open.
Well, glad you joined us. What we're doing right now, Andy, is we're kind of prepping for the May 11th public hearing on the short-term rentals. And we're preparing a frequently asked questions.
Mhm.
list to
Yeah, I
have-
gathered that watching from what was going on. I've been on for a couple of minutes already.
Oh, okay, yeah, I just noticed you, sorry. So we're not Killington. Would a next question that we answer be that, oh, well, Rutland Town doesn't have zoning, so how does this fit into our town government? What would be our, oh, we're bound to have some questions from folks, just a minute, Andy, yeah, I see you.
Yeah.
That, this smacks of zoning, right? So what is our answer going to be? Andy?
Oh, I'm sorry if I missed anything in the beginning. And if I do, I apologize, but I think our main thrust should be strictly the safety issue. I mean, that's where we should stand on the thing, the inspection and the safety part. And the rest of it is just come up with, as generic an answer as we can. But again, the safety issue is the one that I would stress. The inspections and that people that are renting, if you go to a motel, you expect that it has smoke detectors, that has a fire detection system. It's a given. And so anybody that's coming in and renting from an Airbnb or a Vacasa can really have the same expectation that they're walking into something that's been checked and is safe. And I think that's where that's really the basis for this ordinance. I mean, the revenue portion, yes, is there, but I think it's certainly it was Bill Sweet's thrust that it's a safety issue.
Yeah. So yeah, that definitely is something that probably should be like in the introduction of our meeting. This is why we're doing it. Andy, or are you going to be able to make that meeting?
The
on
11th? Yeah,
May
it's by
11th?
Zoom I can. I won't be home. I'm not coming home until Memorial Day,
Okay.
but I'll be there by Zoom if it's or we could just do a FaceTime so I could just be interacting with any one of our members.
Yeah, well, let's stick to Zoom.
Okay.
Because it's set up, it works pretty darn well.
So I had a thought, I obviously have read all the comments we've gotten. There were some that were actually deleted by the system because of the derogatory nature of the comments.
Oh, really?
Facebook actually proactively removed the comments because of the language that was used in it. So
How many of those?
about half a dozen.
Wow.
They got into back and forth with people. When it comes to like the zoning things, when I think of when you think of people think of zoning, they're like, it's telling me what I can and can't do with my property,
Right.
which this is not designed or intended to tell you what you can or cannot do. If you make a choice to participate in this program, here are the rules to which you must participate by. That's it.
Mhm.
I'd
That's good.
also clarify, Bill, something that you just said in terms of zoning. Zoning doesn't tell you what you can or cannot do with your property. What it does is it sets out sections and provides parameters around which people can use that area of land
Okay.
for
Yeah.
various types
Yeah.
of work. So, because I think one of the things that often gets thrown at us is that I don't want anybody telling me what I can or can't do. And I think that that's a false statement from the beginning. Because we
It's like
need to,
stereotyping zoning.
well, it is stereotyping zoning, but it's also setting up a confrontational approach between the general population of a town and their global interests and individual interests. And it doesn't focus enough on the intersection between the general interest and the individual interest, which I think if you take a safety perspective, that those should be common. And so sometimes we get these polarizing statements or comparisons that separate us into camps rather than unite us.
Okay, let's say focus on the frequently asked questions.
I'm trying to do that by saying that what we need to do is make sure that our questions do not lend themselves to a polarization in the response.
No, that's yeah, that is not intended here.
No, I'm
And
just asking us to be
Yeah.
careful.
That makes sense. So.
Yeah.
So I think you're right, Dana. Like, it's not, you're right. It's like, this could be this here and this could be here, this could be here, but that's not what this is about. Like, it really doesn't have
Exactly
anything to do with zoning. And, so one of the things I wrote down is how many Vermont towns have the ordinance? So I can, there's actually, and actually not a difficult way to kind of figure that out. So that's one thing to come on there too. It's like, this isn't just us, this
Right.
is Ludlow and Chester and Killington and Burlington, like some small towns and big towns, like, but
Do you have a number?
I can try and get it for you, but that Vermont
That would be a good question answer.
would be,
S-
that's what I wrote down.
And I think, an extension. If you have something else, Bill. or this- Okay, an extension of the zoning question is why are, and this is not how the question in the frequently asked questions would be phrased, but the sentiment is, why are we picking on these small business people or these people just trying to make a little extra income or have a little side income, have a little business? So are we being unfair to those who are running short-term rentals?
Oh, it's gotta be, safety. Anybody can do it. If they can
That's-
do it, fine, but it's gotta be done by
Safety,
by the
Right.
safety books.
safety
in order
is,
to-
safety is,
But in, or-
17,
17? Thank you.
and not little, it's not little towns either, like Manchester and Burlington, and like, there's some good sized towns in there, so.
So why don't we list them out with this too? When we put it all together, we don't have to do it right now.
and
Um,
to your point, Howard, if somebody wants to operate a restaurant and sell alcohol, they need a liquor license. You're not gonna pick on somebody who wants to run a restaurant and not sell liquor. But if they start or have an interest in selling liquor, they have to conform for safety reasons. And I think that's the commonality. If we can focus on what the commonality is, the common interest between the individual and the group, we should be in good shape.
Well, I don't think this public meeting is going to get to the point where we get everybody thinking the same way. We're going to hear what they have to say, and we're going to have to answer their questions. And some are still going to go away mad, some are not going to be convinced, but we've aired it. So it's not going to be an exercise in trying to convince people
No.
to accept this ordinance.
Right.
Yeah.
This is an airing of what they think.
A forum for discussion,
Yeah,
yes.
And for us to be able to present the whys and wherefores
right.
and the rationale for implementing.
So so we've got the zoning thing, we've got, I'm just trying to run a business here. And maybe the next one after that, or extension of that is, if they're paying their taxes, why should this matter? But they're not paying rooms and meals, right?
but even if
Well,
someone,
but I think it might come up. It could come up again.
So, but like to Dana's thing, like. If they're running a restaurant, they get, like, it's just because you're doing one does not mean you get to do everything, like, that's why we have. Permits for other things, and like, if you want to if you need to dig a water line across the road, you need to get a permit to do that. Just
Yeah.
because you pay taxes doesn't mean you get to dig up a road for free, like,
Right?
so there's more to it than that, so.
Yeah,
It's a good example in the easement that we were talking about with, not the easement, the waiver that we were talking about for the power lines.
Mhm.
I mean, normally they should be buried underground so that they're not creating a hazard for other residents in the town when we were looking at our subdivision ordinance.
mhm.
And there can be waivers, and those waivers are based on mitigating circumstances. So what our role is to find out what is the generally acceptable practice. And I think, Barbara, to your point, 17 towns adopting something like this indicates that people are moving towards a generally accepted practice.
We are in the forefront, though.
Should be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, there was a lot of talk about this, and there's been some movement to accepting these, but 17 is not a whole lot when you consider the 247 or however you count the
I
number.
agree that it's not a, well, that's just on, that's the ones that the Vermont Short-Term Rental Association website has found or listed. So that's, may not even be a whole list, that's just part of it.
Those are the ones who have completed it and have it
Have it adopted.
adopted, and
Yeah,
there
and
are
then-
others working on it.
Yeah,
So, but also,
doesn't count
it
those.
may not be also the quantity, but the type of, like, you know, it's some towns that are some bigger towns that are addressing this also. It's not just like, you know, Danby saying like, we're gonna do it, like, it carries more weight than that, so.
Yeah. So back to the taxes thing, I mean, everyone else, the B and Bs and anyone else running a lodging business out of their home is paying state taxes, room and meals,
They're supposed to.
And they're licensed.
and their license.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, I just want to make sure we all got that in our heads.
Bill, how do you know how many Airbnb or similar ads there, dwellings there are available in the town now being advertised?
About 30.
So I think that's a big number that, and I think that should be something that comes out in the,
Yeah, although one of the Facebook posts, you know, we've listed that number. and-
okay.
And one of the posts said like 30, what's the big deal, essentially, you know?
There are
So-
3 on one street. Like, that becomes that, like we talked about, not wanting to have an impact on a neighborhood, that's 3 on one street. Like, so there's other factors than just having them exist.
So there are implications for the quality of living experience for residents who have chosen an area that is designated on our land use map as residential. That no longer is residential, that becomes commercial. And I think that we need to be able, you're wincing, Barbara, but
Well, I mean, it's kind of it's a fine line there. It's a gray area. Is it really commercial or not? I mean,
I guess it depends on how it's really being used.
I mean, so I think in term, like, and I think Marie brought that point up, is that their neighborhood has covenants that if the property owner is not abiding by them, that's not something we are going to go and enforce.
Right.
But it's something that the homeowner needs to be aware of, you know, that maybe they know, maybe they don't know.
yeah.
But
So, yeah, let me keep working through this list of what has been brought up. Long-term rentals, as opposed to short-term rentals, generate 0 local sales room tax revenue. And that's just flat out wrong, right? Or,
Well-
they're thinking of landlords and tenants,
right,
right?
versus renter, versus someone come up for the weekend, the person paying the Airbnb is paying, the town's getting the 1% tax from that, whereas a long-term renter, somebody that's just living there, isn't paying the 1% tax. But I would argue that if it's gonna be used, we wanna collect our, we know it's 1%, it's still very important. But if it's a long-term person, they're contributing to the community in other ways. If it's a short-term rental person, that's how they're contributing to their community, by paying the 1% sales tax.
Well, if you look at it, the long-term renter is paying income taxes to the state, which benefits everybody in the state.
Yep.
It's not designated for any particular neighborhood.
Right.
However, someone who's coming up for a rental isn't paying anything in terms of income tax to the state or anywhere.
Right.
So the purpose on this is to regulate it as if it is a commercial business interest, which it is, whether it's huge
Right.
or whether it's small. So going back to what Barbara had said, why does it matter if there are only 30? So if there are only 30 convenience stores in Burlington, we don't have to have them charge sales tax because it's a small number. I mean, that is not a logical
Okay, let's
Question.
look at this,
Yeah.
from another perspective.
I was
Sean?
gonna say safety. We don't, I think safety, all these things we're talking about, safety is a
Yeah.
component of it.
And-
But
and Andy
also,
made a great point. I mean, it's like, if you go to a hotel, if you go to a Days Inn, if you go to a Days Inn, you're gonna expect that their fire alarm works
Yep.
and that like that's been inspected and it's safe, and someone coming up here isn't necessarily thinking about that because they're I'm renting a house, like they're not thinking about those kinds of things. That's why we're doing it on their behalf, as the state does for the regulation for hotels and motels. Like,
Okay.
so
so I've got a couple offshoots of this.
Yep.
One is, I mean, aren't long-term rentals, I mean, isn't that housing
yes, yeah.
as
I think that's-
opposed to a vacation
Yes,
place?
I think that was the intent, was it's a residence, not a rental. Like, it's somebody that lives there 365, not for a weekend.
Right,
That's,
right.
that's what I took from long-term rental.
Yeah, but this one person didn't, but
And these properties really should be assessed as a commercial property with the income and expense. I mean, and like any business, they're assessed primarily income and expense. And
yeah,
it makes a huge difference in a residence if all of a sudden they're gonna be based on their, income and expense for that year. It could be a huge difference in
Right,
assessment. And that, of course, the benefit to the town.
and I don't know, should we make, I mean, an extension of this discussion about, is it housing or is it, a vacation place? Is it taking away housing from local residents? Do we want to get into that? Or
No.
is it a good argument?
I would agree with Andy, yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought I was muted and I was just gonna unmute myself. So I apologize.
I agree with you, Andy, but go ahead.
You're
It's
busted,
no.
Andy.
I don't think we should go down that road. We shouldn't even look at it. We should
That's a
strictly
philosophical
say,
discussion.
we
Yeah.
should say on the
It
safety
actually-
thing and the fact that if anyone questions any part of this ordinance, it just essentially ask them what they would change, how they would change it, what they feel is wrong about it. This is just an informational meeting, and I think we should also stress that we do not implement this
Right.
ordinance.
Well,
And
who
I think
does?
it should be, okay, I can't stress that enough. I mean, that we have to say that it's the select board that is positively the people that are.
Yes.
And so that, I think that way we can just keep the question short and sweet and explain it, what we have to people and let it go. Obviously, we're not gonna have pros there. I mean, and, we're gonna have cons, so to speak, I believe, just as
Well,
most hearings
yeah.
I've been
Yeah.
part and parcel with, it's the people that are unhappy that are gonna show up. So,
Yes, and I'm not sure the select board's gonna have a hearing, a public meeting. They don't have to. And I think this might be the one meeting for this ordinance. So we can't, fob
Possible.
off too much here.
mhm.
And some select board members will most likely be in attendance too.
But it's not our decision to have this. I mean,
Right,
we're not making the decision that this is needed and we should have it. We're just attempting to implement it.
No, we're providing input to the select board as asked
Okay.
about who else is doing this and the getting our perspective as,
well, that raises a
Planning
good
commission.
question. Do we support this as a group? Are we gonna stand by this?
Oh, if it's done with safety, if it's done properly and in the right places, what's wrong with it?
Andy?
Let's make a motion and vote it.
Oh, you want to do that now? Or you want to finish
It's
everything?
fine by me, and I'll be glad to make a motion that we, the Rutland Town Planning Commission has reviewed and drafted an ordinance regarding short-term rentals and we stand behind it. We believe it's a good thing for the town.
Okay, a motion has been made
I'll second that.
and seconded. Discussion?
The only thing, Andy, that I would object to is that we haven't done a final review. And so I think it might be premature for us to actually vote on that question. And I think that once we, or we're not gonna have another meeting, right?
No.
We are,
It's the next meeting.
it's the next meeting.
And,
Let me withdraw my motion. And
but
I'll
hold
make
on,
it, I'll make it at a more appropriate time.
hold on. We will not be approving a final version. That is the select board's
Decision,
job.
correct.
So whatever, I mean, if we pass Andy's motion as his original motion or not, it's not gonna be a final draft. It's still a draft. So I think the question is, do we support the draft, the concept?
That's what I was going to highlight, because Andy was making a motion about this to accept this, which is not our place, and we haven't done our own review. So I think Andy's motion would be better stated as we support the select board in the concept of putting together a short-term rental ordinance that would help improve, that would help foster the health and safety of anybody making use of those properties in the town.
Andy?
I'm fine with it any way we want to do it here. I'll be glad to amend my motion to as how it's been stated by Dana.
Okay, Dana. Repeat it.
Oh, Bill's got it. I'm sure it's on tape.
Oh, it's recorded. Yep, you're good, you're good.
So we approve of essentially we approve the process
The
of
concept, yeah.
The concept.
Yeah.
the concept that the select board.
Actually, if I could, I think maybe we could easily do it a little easier and just say we're approving sending this document to the select board,
Well, there, yeah,
Yep,
which
That's-
then makes it obvious that we're behind it.
mm-hmm, okay.
so approving.
Because if
a
we
draft
weren't behind it,
ordinance
we wouldn't approve the sending to the select board for their review.
I
right.
think that makes sense.
I think
How
so.
about the seconder?
Oh, sure.
Yes, I'm fine with
Okay
it.
with
I
that?
second it, yes.
Yep.
Any other
So do you want me
discussions?
to restate
With
that?
our
or-
review?
No, we're good with it.
Is that with our review or what?
I think Andy's motion is like, at this point in time, we approve.
Is there, I mean, there are any changes that we want to make to it? Or like, is everybody good with it as you've got it in your hands?
Do we want to wait on this? I'm just thinking, like, if we're asked at the public meeting, well, do you guys support this? What is our answer gonna be?
And I think they would be saying like, are you really supporting the creation of this ordinance? Answer would be yes.
Yes,
Are you, which is different than, are you in favor of enacting the document that sits in front of us today?
That's a different,
But we haven't finished it yet. Are we in favor of the ordinance as on its face? Yes. Do we know, is this the final draft?
you
No.
Yeah,
It's really two different questions.
yeah, I think that might answer question. Is that answer, Howard?
No, that's,
I,
Hang on.
I was, go ahead, Howard, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. I'm good.
No, I was going to, a more generic comment. I think we need to come up with reasons why we support this. Okay, and safety is one. And the fact that we're not stopping anyone from doing anything, but just putting guidelines around it, and those guidelines are for safety, so we can fall back on that and not have to go into it's
Okay,
happening here or what happens there.
yeah,
And the fact that if this is a business, if someone's running a business, businesses have guidelines and have to be licensed and have to do certain things in order to run the business.
mhm.
But I think if we're able to put together 3 or 4 of those, we can always go back to them when any of these questions come up. I don't mean that's the only thing we say, but that's the essence of why we're doing this.
Mm-hmm. And so we got a couple, any others you want to add to the list? We've got safety, we've got that, you know, this
Not
This,
limiting the
this is
building.
considered a business, so businesses usually have guidelines, requirements.
Do we want to, well, we've, in our ordinance, and I'm looking at them now, we talk about one is to preserve and protect residential neighborhood
Yep, that's
character
it.
and livability. I think that's a little fuzzy to use in response to a question.
But I mean, we are trying to keep the character of
Yes.
neighborhoods.
Well, there's another one here. To preserve the character of the neighborhood, guests shall not have an adverse effect on the character of the neighborhood of the property that the property is located in.
Mhm,
It needs to be reworded, but that's.
Yeah. okay. Anything else? Anyone notice that should be part of our core message? That we fall back on? Okay, think about that, and if anything comes to mind, just throw it out there. Andy, what would you like to do with your motion at this point?
I don't know, I'm kind of lost track here.
I think that's a leading question, Andy.
It is. Well, I think we should certainly, we need to make a motion to send this to the select board anyway, correct?
Well, I think we should wait and hear what, I mean,
Yes.
that's what we said. We would get input from the public,
Okay,
gather that. And, you know, and incorporate that as needed in our draft. And then send it to the select board.
well, I think with discussion we just had, we really didn't have any pros or cons there, one way or the other, so why don't I just, I'll withdraw my motion right now. And we'll just, later on in the meeting, if we want to talk about it again, we can. If everybody's comfortable with that.
Okay. So we support the concept and here are some reasons why. Safety.
The other thing, Barbara, I think that it will be important to highlight is that we are, as part of the charge from the select board, they have asked us to solicit input from the public.
Mhm.
And so the meeting then is an opportunity for the public to tell us what in the ordinance, as Andy was saying earlier, impacts them. And if there's something that adversely impacts them, how could that be modified to have less of an impact on them?
Okay, okay,
I think that also helps us to reach out and say, hey, we're all in this together. We're trying to make sure that whatever document goes to the select board is something that people have had ample opportunity
okay,
to
okay.
provide.
Okay, I think we've got that down. One of the questions that came in is, if we pass, if this is adopted and enacted in Rutland Town, can a house, you know, that's used for these purposes still be a primary residence of the owner?
Yes,
If they live there, yes,
it's occurring currently.
but it can only be the primary residence if the person is living in that structure.
And how is it working? Are they like leaving
We have
for?
a scenario where there is a homeowner who, when their house is rented, they leave the house
This thing, yeah.
and they return after this, so they live there. I mean, to be primary, it's more than you do the majority of the year,
50%,
so
right.
you're not renting it more than 6 months of the year, but they are. They live there, and then when it's rented, they leave the residence for that period of time.
Okay, we got a good answer there. As long as the owners are paying their taxes, this shouldn't matter to the town.
That's not a
But
question.
then,
Safety.
health, the safety and all that thing. I did not understand the canine rooster. Comp-
Yeah, that was interesting side comment. So yeah, I don't know why they brought that up either, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I got the snide part, but I have no idea what the roosters.
it's our
What-
police canine, it's our police dog.
Oh,
His name's Rooster.
That's
We really do. have a police
when
dog
did we get a police dog?
a couple months ago.
Okay,
He's been in training. He's been on the road for a couple weeks, so it's not, if you stay tuned to Facebook, I guess I'll show you some pictures later, but yes, we have a dog.
cool.
And-
Cool.
And his name's Rooster, yep.
Is this? Is this about vagrants, drug dealers and panhandlers? If we get that question.
Didn't they say, don't we have an ordinance about that or something? Didn't that comment have that in there? Cause we repealed the ordinance,
Right.
so we don't anymore.
And this is about the safety of anyone, for anyone who is uses one of these,
Mhm.
I get terminology, one of these dwellings, I keep coming up with dwellings, but anyone who is an Airbnb customer, this is about their safety. That's what this is about. It's not about any,
I mean, right, I mean, it could be about, heavy partying and that sort of thing. But it's not a way to try to,
Regulate.
yeah,
This is-
or to address the vagrant issue and drug dealers and it's housing units, right, is the term we have in the ordinance,
Yeah,
not dwellings.
I think it's how, yeah.
Yeah,
housing units, okay.
yeah, it's just, yeah. Did you have a comment, Howard?
No, no,
Yeah, the housing shortage came up several times on Facebook. Uh, you know, in the sense of, is this aggravating the issue of people not being able to find housing, affordable housing?
If someone's, I
No,
mean,
that's-
there are people arguing against the fees because it's homeowners, we're like, almost like punishing the homeowner. But if they decide to not participate, then aren't they living in the house? So doesn't that not? I mean, I don't really see either way. I mean, I understand how Burlington had to take an aggressive approach, like no more than 30%, things like that. Like they have a much stricter ordinance about this because so many people were turning them into short-term rentals. That it was a legitimate issue. I don't think the housing stock in the town is the same ratio of apartment complexes, things like that. Like,
Yeah.
it's not, I don't think looking at Rutland Town, having this ordinance, because this ordinance, by the way, doesn't say you must or you can't do any of this. So we're not making the decision on availability of housing. That's still the property owner's decision. So if you don't want zoning, this supports that. Like,
Yeah, but
it's not telling you can or can't, so.
there is some there is some affordable housing
There is, yes.
in Rutland Town. And so I think one of the arguments is that some of these these owners of these houses, these housing units, make more money doing short-term rentals than they would by flipping the house and maybe providing, housing for a local resident or someone looking to move into Rutland Town. That's what they're asking is that,
And there's
That's an irrelevant question
short
to us.
of adopting a regulation like Burlington, there's nothing we're gonna do to change that.
right, and Dana, I don't think it is appropriate for us to say that's during the hearing, that's an inappropriate question to
I
anyone.
have no plan to say that during a hearing. I'm telling us that that's an inappropriate question for us to have to undertake.
Yeah, I
So
just
we better
I
rephrase
think
the
it's- I
question.
think that's beyond this. I mean, addressing housing shortages is beyond the scope of what this meeting is
Right.
designed to do. And that's a discussion to have at another time, but it's not something that we're gonna answer in the meeting. It's not really, and it's not something really at this time related to the ordinance.
We're not charged to
it's-
look at that.
It's not, but it's a hot topic and people just might want to talk about it. How is this helping the housing shortage or, should we be doing more about the housing shortage? So I
I-
just think we need a good answer. for that.
We had that housing project that wanted to come into town. We were ready right behind them to help them move in, and it was the property, it was the sale of the property that fell through, so
Yeah.
we support those things. But there's only so much we can do. We can't force people to do one thing or the other, and. Yeah, yeah.
But this does not impact the housing shortage. I mean, the straight answer to that is that this doesn't impact
That's,
the housing shortage in a negative, in a negative way. I shouldn't say, it just doesn't impact the housing shortage. We don't want to get into the fact that we'd be better off if there was a residential,
that's a
So,
philosophical.
that's a philosophical
okay,
question.
yeah,
yeah.
explain to me why this doesn't address the housing shortage, or there's
Because-
no connection.
Because there's no loss of, there's no fewer housing, there's no fewer housing dwellings or whatever available as a result of this.
Some people are arguing there are.
Well,
Some people argue that-
in what way? I mean, we'd have to hear that.
Mhm.
What do they think is happening? I'm not sure. I heard what Bill said. They think they're not making as much money. I
They're-
mean, I
they're-
don't understand how.
They're thinking they're being outpriced out of places because the owner of the home can make more money with short-term rentals than he, on an ongoing basis, as opposed to renting it out or selling it.
And that's
to-
fine,
to-
and we're not stopping him from doing that. We're saying, but if you're gonna do that, there's safety concerns.
Right.
They're concerns for the neighborhood.
So the point, go ahead.
Whether we have this ordinance or not, that scenario still exists.
It does, and it's just a hot topic and people,
Yeah.
some people may just say, but don't you want to do some more to address the housing crisis?
And my response would be very respectfully, the charge from the select board to the planning commission was to look at this ordinance and review it for its applicability to our situation and making sure that anybody that would participate in this type of venture could be doing so with health and safety as the primary objectives. That's what our charge was. You can open up a philosophical conversation at a different time, but that's not why we're
Yeah,
here.
yeah, but we don't want the same answer for every question.
I wouldn't be giving the same answer for every question.
Well, we're kind of getting to that point where it's like safety and that, we're coming back to just the same stuff. And we're gonna just sound like puppets. So, I mean, I think we have to maybe have a slightly broader message, or just be open to the topics they bring up and hear them out and not just have a canned answer.
So Barbara, if I'm hearing your conundrum, and this is something that Fern tells me that I spend way too much time doing. You're trying to answer and satisfy the people on this side who say that we're restricting their rights as property owners. And that this ordinance is injuring them. And then on the other hand, we are trying to address or appease those people who are advocating for not having any of this happening in town at all. Because they believe that just the concept of short-term rentals is being injurious to low-income renters or something like that. I don't know. So when you get into that type of dichotomy, that is outside the scope of what our charge is. And I have no trouble explaining that we have a charge and that those issues, as relevant as they may be to the individual, are not what the select board has asked us to review.
Okay, so what exactly has the select board asked us to do?
They have asked us, my understanding is to look at what other towns have done in terms of short-term rentals, to look at identifying the number of short-term rentals that we have, look at patterns or tendencies, and to get out ahead of a new area, just like solar panels 10 years ago, that we wanted to make sure we had some understanding about And we had a way of protecting the interests of the general population in our municipality. The general population, including residents as well as visitors. And that's why we are looking at this through a lens of multiple perspectives. That's why we have invited people to come in and talk to us about the reasonable nature of the guidelines that are being put in place to help regulate an emerging industry.
But so far, all of our answers to any of those potential questions has been, well, we're doing this for the sake of, better safety.
Well, we had a list, and I have 4 things.
So it sounds like we've already made up our minds. And we have, it sounds like we just have one answer to everything, which I'm not sure is a good thing.
I would disagree because I see there's nuances to the different types of questions. And we've gone through probably a half dozen, maybe more, questions, which include how many towns have this ordinance? 17. How many other towns are working on it? We don't know. If people are paying taxes, why does it matter? And we have an answer for that. That it's like running any type of lodging business, and you have to comply when you're in an industry, you have to comply with the standards of that industry. That is a completely different answer. It doesn't mean that we've made up our minds about anything, because not the ones who make the decisions anyway. It's the select board. Select board has charged us with gathering the information,
Right.
both from us
Right.
and from the community. That's why
Right,
we're
right.
inviting them in.
I can see some people taking exception to us labeling it an industry. It's,
I would at this point probably disagree. I mean,
yeah, I know.
they would feel like this is, I'm not part of an industry, I'm just doing this, but when you look at what Airbnb is, what VRBO is, I mean, when the Killington has 700 of them, it's an industry.
Maybe what we should do is do a short presentation of what is out there on those web pages and those services. Should we, or?
I think that's opening up a can of worms that we don't necessarily want to open up. I have an example, however, and you can talk about industries, and you have 2 high-profile examples, Uber and Lyft. And the Supreme Court decided that they were an industry that needed to be regulated because they were basically functioning as a taxi operation. And no, their employees were not private contractors. So there is a general interest that goes beyond us. Now, once again, I'm crossing over into the philosophical. I'm not
Yeah.
sure that I want to
Yeah.
be there,
I
Right,
agree.
right, right.
but my
I
point
agree with
is,
what you said,
Right.
and that it's philosophical, yeah.
but
Yeah.
those were originally, the argument was that it wasn't an industry. And so to your point, Bill, when something new is emerging, it may not be tagged as an industry, but Vermont is very creative. We talk about cottage industries, we talk about very small businesses, we talk about micro businesses.
Well,
And, so industry can take on a much bigger definition.
Right, and
Right.
I think it's used as like a generic term.
Absolutely.
To say that, but
but some people might not.
we have a maple syrup industry in Vermont.
Right.
How is the individual sugar maker?
Okay, yeah,
Right,
okay, so
We could take that to a whole nother level.
we can, let's bring it back.
Yes.
Do we want to show these services and what is being offered? Will that impart more information, show people more about what's going on in town than just saying, well, we've seen evidence of 30 houses. Do we want to get into a little more detail?
Like what kind of detail? I mean,
Like,
maybe, but-
like show a webpage of some of the ads.
What's the purpose?
The purpose is to give them a better idea of what is going on in town and
so-
how these homes are
so
being.
I don't, I kind of like the idea of like showing people like, here's some examples, real world examples of your town. The logistics are a different problem, because if we have this room full, the only way to show it is up there. So that could be a little difficult.
Well, we could print out do a
So-
PDF of it.
We could, let me,
I'm just thinking it, you know,
let me think about that, like a little
I
PowerPoint.
mean,
presentation
usually,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
you usually start a public meeting out with a bit of a presentation.
Um,
I mean, it just occurred to me that maybe we want a little bit more data.
okay. What if we, okay, let's, maybe, and if we come
Yeah.
up with a good way to deliver it, yes.
Yep.
But most of the sites like Airbnb you don't get to see specifics until you become a member. So, not that it's really private information at that point, but, you know, we don't usually get into the discussions of like the specific things like that until it's necessary.
Can we get into a description of how this system works? Like, I mean, I don't think most people know, you know, how do you get into one of these houses, or what websites or services do you look for? Can we?
Can I get a word anytime, Barbara, when I'd like to be recognized sometime soon?
Go
If you
ahead.
could, please.
Sorry.
Well,
Andy.
no, I've been waving my hand at you, but I don't think you've been seeing me. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we can make some real quick assumptions. Number one, all the people that are coming to the meeting are going to have read this ordinance and are going to be somewhat familiar with it. Because I
Maybe.
think well, it should be. I mean, they're coming in to comment about an ordinance. They certainly are going to be able to read it, right? We're going to have copies of it for them
Ask,
when they arrive, correct?
Right, just ask,
yeah, that would be a
Okay.
good initial
because
question.
that will quickly determine
Yes.
their level of ability to engage in the.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not convinced, Howard, they will have done it
Yeah.
ahead of
Okay.
time. Andy, yeah,
But I still feel that other than that, we say why we've done it, we're doing it from a safety thing, from a tax standpoint, from a tax, you know, to make sure that there's tax equitability. Other than that, I think then we just ask the person, well, what would you change about this ordinance? If you're not happy with this, what would you do differently? And we certainly did that at some of the and the very contentious solar panel hearings back from before most of you were on board, but I'm sure, Howard, you remember a few of them. That and that's all you can really do. I mean, that's what it is. It's for public input. And so therefore, if the person is unhappy with the document that we've put forth, it stands to reason that they'll have an alternative suggestion. Now, the alternative suggestion could be very basic, but
yeah.
you know, and just not doing
Very
it. Right.
basic.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there might be some people that have read it and might have some suggestions they'd like to make one way or the other. I think we're
Absolutely.
getting worried about people coming in on the attack, and I just don't think that's going to happen. At least I hope not.
Well, yeah, we hope not too. But we're going to prepare,
They do, right.
we're going to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Mhm.
We're not trying to convince people. We're just trying to answer their
Right.
questions.
Yes.
The other- I mean, they don't have to agree with what we say.
Right.
Or
And we
feel-
don't have to convince them.
We don't have to
but we-
convince them. Just tell them why we're doing this,
We're
why
here
it's
to
being
answer
done.
your questions to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
But like you said, a final approval or denial of this going into effect lies at the hands of the select board. So this is to gather the information to deliver that to the select board. You know, and you know, like, you know, we're kind of on track for kind of where I thought we'd be at this point, so that's good, I guess. But you know, I think the meeting's gonna be interesting. I think there's gonna be people on both sides of it. I think like we have the letter from Maria, I think who's in favor of it, and there's other people there are people that are absolutely in favor of it.
Yep.
But as most of these discussions that I've seen and other topics, the people that are against it are the ones that come out and are the loudest. And the ones that are for it are like, you know, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, and they
Yeah.
just are
Yeah,
they're okay
and,
with it.
and there may be a difference in who has read it and who has not read it,
Absolutely. Yeah.
how that lays out. So let's explore a little bit more, you know, between now and the 11th about whether we can do some sort of presentation. See if that's, you know, possible at all.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, just,
Another way of focusing the conversation would be in the first few minutes. Before we actually do any type of a presentation or an introduction. Is ask people to write down, you can have note cards or pieces of paper, write down questions that they have. Okay, and then one or two of us during the meeting can go through. So I'm just gonna make it up. Sherman and I can sit down, take these questions, put them into an order to see what they can, and what they have put together, seen commonalities, while somebody else is doing a presentation, and then hand that list of questions to someone who's leading the meeting and say, here are the 5 essential questions that we have gathered from the input that you have written down. And we will try, these are the most salient ones, and we'll try to answer them. At the end of that question and answer period, if there's a question that you have that hasn't been addressed, feel free to.
Okay.
I don't like that.
Why?
Because, I mean, I want everyone to be able, even if they're repeating what someone else said, I want everyone to have a chance to have their say.
What-
And I don't want us to be editing those at all and determining which ones are most pertinent.
The other thing that we may want to think about is in your operating rules of procedure.
Yeah.
there Is a section, which I leave on the table over there.
Right.
For public participation.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it would probably be good to review that right before the meeting and just remind people, like, here are, like, I was planning to make, something to say there, so
Yep.
like.
Hmm.
To be.
The
fair,
ground
everybody,
rules.
Yep.
we have a set of rules for public participation. And if it gets out of hand, it will have to end, cause that's the other thing is I know your request, and I think your request is gonna be approved.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, so, that's one help, but reminding people that, to be fair to everybody here, we have rules that we intend to make sure everybody follows. I
That's a-
hate saying
that's a
enforce that,
great
but,
idea.
like, we have rules we intend everybody to follow. Please be respectful of other people's time, and so they're respectful of yours, like,
Yeah.
and if you need a copy, I'll make.
But if there's
copies.
only like 3 people in the audience, we probably wouldn't have to do that. But yes, that would be, if the room is half full or more, that's a great idea just to go through that.
I thought about that earlier, like, yeah.
I have a question for
Yeah.
Bill.
Yeah.
Bill, do you have any idea how many facilities there are that would come under this ordinance and currently?
In the town,
Yeah,
we have about 30.
how many?
30,
Really?
yes.
Well, I, that surprises me, but on the other hand,
It did me too, Jim.
it probably shouldn't, because if you stop and think about it, there's 3 major overnight lodging facilities that are not doing that anymore. And that's gonna continue to put the pressure on these alternate
Yeah.
But,
options.
and present a business opportunity
Right.
for residents.
And again, that goes back to, like, we aren't telling anybody that you must or can't do this. But
We just want to
like Peter
know.
said, somebody could open a convenience store without a gas station. But if you want to sell gas, well, now there's additional things things you must do because of that. And that you're free to live there and do essentially whatever you want to on your property. But if you're going to have people occupy your house that aren't residents, then you have an obligation to their safety. And you have an obligation to your neighbors, because some of the concerns I've gotten some phone calls is people that live in fire districts that have community wells or community septics. They say, we aren't designed to have a dozen people on a weekend,
Right.
every weekend.
Right.
Like, that's something
in here.
that's beyond the scope of the system. And I've had to answer, I said, this is not something that we can address with a regulation. That's the neighborhood that has to address
Yeah,
that. So,
yeah.
there are concerns about that out there, but that's the other thing, is making people aware of their obligation to their neighborhood as well.
Yeah, and Jim, it's not always, local residents who are making money off this.
Correct.
We got some comments like, why don't we save our housing or whatever, however you want to put it, for residents to buy and not investors, not, can we limit what the potential is to investors, through this short-term rental system? So,
So how long a period of time did it take to get from, say, 10 to 30?
Don't know. I don't know. I started this beginning of this year. And that's when I found them. I have no idea how long it's taken to get to where we are now. Nobody's been paying attention. That's the thing. But and again, to that point, Barbara, like, it's whether we have something that gives guidelines or regulations in place or not, people can do whatever they want to with it. Like, it doesn't, we're not saying there's nothing in this that's going to prohibit someone from using their house as a short-term rental, whether it's here or not.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing. It's like, I understand I understand that point of view, but there's no regulation that we're going to do short of zoning and really strict zoning on really specific situations that's going to stop that from happening.
okay, okay.
The other thing, and this is just for information, and I'm not suggesting that I or anybody else say it at a public hearing, but if there are, Vermont is a vacation destination, whether we want to admit that or not. And so there are certain attractions, and we want people to come and spend time here and spend money here. I mean, that's a fact of life. There are problems with that in terms of how it gets, how we promote our regular communities. I'm not going to get into the philosophical discussion. However, when you have big interests, such as in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, they have had put in requirements that if you're doing this type of short-term rental and you have more than one property, you need to have a realtor's license in order to be able to do that. And what that does is it imposes another level of burden that if you are because that's showing that that's more of a business model than it is a residential model. And so now you've really crossed over
Right.
into that.
And I don't foresee that. But on other point, like Burlington is probably the most restrictive one in the state. Woodstock is fairly restrictive. It limits the number of days per year outside foliage that you're allowed to do it. And you have to register and you have to report each one to them when they do it. And you can't rent more than X number of days. I mean, there's a lot to theirs that because they're trying to limit the number of people during the peak season and off-peak season in the town.
Mm.
And that's not what we're doing. I mean,
Right.
And as far as the towns, like, I think we're pretty medium of the road for what we're asking of people. And I think someone that is legitimately not doing it as, that's a homeowner that owns a second property. And by the way, Jim, I have about 6 that the primary owners of the properties do not live in Vermont. So at least so far. So there are 6 that
20%.
Yeah, that the owner of the property is not a Vermont resident. So that's important also for other reasons. So the other ones, they live here. So are they living there part of the year? We don't know, but that's where, if they're living out of state, we're asking them to have someone responsible for that property. So if the sewer backs up, if a pipe breaks, someone is available to go there and help fix that. Where right now, there's no obligation for anything. So if the person's there for a week and the first night they get there, the pipes break, there's nothing that says they have to have someone that's there to come. We're telling you, you need to have someone responsible. And by the way, you're telling us who it is. So so we're making sure that, yes, it's safe for the people coming, but that the owner takes responsibility for the property as well. So but like I said, about 20% don't live here. So, or at least don't list their primary addresses here. So,
And to your point, Bill, if that were a long-term, and goes back to Barbara's question as well. If that were a long-term rental, they would have to have somebody who would be able to come and fix that toilet, immediately or within 24 hours.
Right.
Yeah,
And so what this does is it brings in line a question of service
Yeah.
to the clients and to the community that is a level of expectation that our town has come
Yep.
to expect.
Yep.
And that's all we're.
yep,
trying to do.
Okay.
good discussion.
What other questions were there? I don't remember what other ones there were.
Well, the one was, if it ain't broke,
Oh.
you know, don't, instead of saying why fix it, don't fix it. Um,
But then the argument is like, okay, so we wait till we have all these problems to start to do something, then we're like 6 months away from being able to even address the problem, so.
right,
The answer to the
Right.
question is preventive maintenance. That's what we're doing, preventive maintenance.
Yep.
So I don't know. I'm a big mouth. I'm also a big thinker. And if somebody comes up with a question, just tell me when I can speak and when I can't speak, and I
Would you like a little red light, green light for? Dana?
there you go, red light, green light, go.
I think I'll just have Dana take notes.
Happy to do that too.
Dan, Dana, you do a transcript.
We need word for word notes, okay, so.
Yeah.
Well, at some point, we are gonna have to get together to decide how we handle this whole thing. How,
Right. Exactly.
you know, how are we gonna do it? What are we as a planning commission member gonna do? And what are our roles in this whole thing? In the May
He-
11th meeting? Are you gonna run the meeting? You gonna answer all the questions, or does the first person who comes up with an answer it? Or, I mean, we need to have some agree upon way to approach it.
You want a buzzer for the desk? Like, I got that one.
My question will be, Barbara, would you like me to try to take a crack at that question?
Really? You'll do that?
That's what
You'll
exactly what I'll
you'll
do.
do that?
I will.
Okay. I think that's all we need.
There you go. Okay. And if Jim has a question, he can just answer. And Howard, he can also just answer.
Yeah, I mean, I just see the flow being much like our normal flow, except, you know, the questions are gonna be coming from, you know, over there. And if somebody wants to comment, someone wants to answer that question, just let me know. And
If no one speaks up, you know that either you can ask me or I will ask you.
I think it'd be helpful, like if someone could say, like, Sharon could say, you know, I'd like to answer that question, or, you know,
yeah,
or say like, you know,
That's-
like, just.
how we normally,
We can get a baton if you want to pass it around, like, you know, but.
yeah, I don't know if it has to be that formal with a baton, but.
The other thing that we could do prior to maybe we start 15, maybe we convene 15 minutes before before the hearing goes, or before the presentation occurs. And we look at the Q&A, and we each identify something that speaks to us that we could try to address. So that, say Howard has a question on water, there's a question there and it has to do with water districts or something like that. And Howard could say, you know what, I could give the information on that very succinctly. Whereas Dana would ramble around for 15 minutes and maybe not get to the answer. You know, so then
But,
that way
yeah.
there could be a point person identified ahead of time who would probably speak up and ask you to be recognized to answer that question. That would give us a little bit of structure. And then if there is you know, just a pause and nobody's answering, you can, Barbara, say, you know, Sherman, you had some good thoughts about this when we were working on it. Would you like to take first crack at it? That way we can structure who's doing what. And then if somebody else, when Sherman starts to speak and identifies a couple of things, maybe Jim says, you know what? That makes me think that we could also add this. That way, it's an organic process. And Andy can be sitting on online on screen and
Muted.
We'll have him put his thumb up or something when he wants to speak. And maybe Andy can identify one of those Q&A questions, and we would invite him in long distance to actually address that particular question before any of us would speak to it.
Yep.
I would just have a suggestion I'd like to make on this.
Yeah.
If we have a room that is half full, then I think you really have to go back to the strict way of everyone being recognized. Because if you don't do that, and our members start talking back and forth among themselves, the audience is just gonna take it upon themselves to join right in.
Yep.
And I've had that experience. And so unfortunately, you have to go for more rigidity if there's a whole lot of people. I mean, if there's only three people, then sure, it can just be an open-sided discussion with everyone. But I would say if there's more than even a half a dozen people, it should be everybody raising their hands and being recognized, including all our members.
Or another way of doing that is a sign-up sheet, and we just go down the list.
Yes,
For the public,
For the public, if there's more than 6
for the
people,
public.
I have a sign-in sheet, so that would be something to be like,
but make sure everyone who wants to speak fills it out, and then we go by that
so,
list.
so before, we'll talk before the meeting, because there's some things we can do, like, we can have like, are you here to participate, or are you here to listen?
Right,
Like, and
Right.
that's it. Like, if you just want to listen, that's fine, but if you participate, you need to let us know, so.
yeah, and I think that's what Andy's saying, we've been in meetings before where if you do want to say something, if you've got something to say, you sign up. There's a sign up sheet. And I think we're all talking about the same thing here, just maybe.
Yes, I agree.
We just want to be careful, we don't restrict somebody from all of a sudden saying that they want to say something, but because they didn't sign up, they
That's-
can't.
That's a good point.
Or
And
the
you
people that
just,
said they definitely want to participate, that we'll go through them first.
Right.
then if you
Right,
decide
and
that
then-
you do,
then open
now-
it
now
up.
they're- Yep,
And we could follow the same rules that we had set in the rules of procedure that other people who have already spoken to a topic would have to wait till somebody else who had not had a chance says something, and then we can make sure that everybody's
Why
included.
don't you just let it, why don't we just say anyone who's gonna attend the meeting should sign up? That way there's
well,
no,
no, what they need to, like,
Yeah.
if you come to the meeting, you're supposed to sign in.
You sign in.
Yeah.
and then there's like a checkbox if you
Yeah.
want, if you
well, it doesn't matter,
intend to
does it?
speak.
Okay.
That just gives us some, a fair way of going down a list and making sure everyone that wanted to speak, speaks.
When you get to the end of it, you could ask, is there anybody else?
That's right.
Right,
That's right.
right.
We don't need to cut anybody short.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And I think we all should just keep in mind that we're not, our job is not to counter or to fully answer all of their questions. We want to hear
That
their
may be-
questions.
That may be a very important point to make at the start.
Yeah,
Well, that's just amongst ourselves.
Right.
but,
well, yeah,
but even for,
letting the public know.
yeah,
that
letting the
that
public
is-
know
that
is a good-
What your role is, that's the role, yeah.
Well, is that in that should be in that policy that, if it's not. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's an informational meeting, and it's not necessarily
Yes.
that we're gonna have an answer to every single
That's
question.
right.
We
That's
just have to
right.
put that out as the caveat.
We will try to answer as many questions as we
Yeah.
can. But this thing is all brand new. So I've gone down the Facebook list pretty much. Has anyone else heard anything from the public about this? We got that one letter, that one person also did a Facebook post about the covenants.
this, yes.
Yeah. And
That's an important topic, but a lot of people don't realize that, like, we don't research them, we don't enforce them, like, that's an issue that the neighbors have to handle outside of the town.
so Andy, this is Hitzel Terrace. Is that huh? Okay, good to know. Is that a self-governed neighborhood? This one resident says there's covenants. So is it like the town doesn't have any say anyway? with
No,
the
no.
situation?
No, they're deeded covenants in our neighborhood. And they prohibit commercial business. You only allowed to have single family dwellings. It's just a whole list of things. I wish I had, I would have loved to have bring them down to you tonight, but I don't know of any way to get them right to you now. And they've been checked, I have to say. We had some challenges to them, and we settled it just short of going to court. And the one neighbor that, one person signed off on it and agreed that the covenants are valid. I've been to 3 different attorneys and they've all said it's the same thing. They're valid and enforceable. However, they've got to be, to get enforcement, you have to go to civil court,
Yeah.
which makes it
I'm just,
long and slow
yeah,
and costly.
right. And I'm
But
also
we don't know
wondering,
where this is gonna go on the Airbnb part for us there. We have certain, because we're a fire district, we have our operating permit only allows for so many homes of so many persons. And we're right up at our limit right now, so that could be a potential issue for
and
us.
what would take precedent, the covenants or what the town enacts and adopts? You know, if there's some, if
Where's
there's.
Norman when we need him? No, I'm not going there. I have no idea. Well, the covenant, if the covenants say it's only single family dwellings. And if someone puts an Airbnb apartment in, I would assume that if we get people together and want to spend the money to file, then we could challenge them if in fact we wanted to.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't see that happening, to be honest with you.
So
Okay, Bill.
with the ordinance. We'll take
Pardon?
a neighbor in a neighbor in a neighborhood with a covenant violates our ordinance and says we they're operating without a license. I can issue them, under the enforcement, issue a penalty that day. And it's effective that day. If they're operating outside the deeded covenant, they have to get together, go to an attorney, file in court, wait for a hearing, which could take weeks and months. We have ability to act immediately. They have to go through a different process.
So there has to be some sort of a balance between what's called for in
Well,
the covenant and,
If they're violating the covenant of the neighborhood, we aren't going to address, we won't address that. We won't issue any action on that. Our action could potentially, as I'm thinking through this, could be used in the court hearing, because look, the town's taking this action. Here's the proof of what's going on. They could use that, I suppose.
yeah,
As a rationale for supporting why
Right,
they're
for supporting it,
violating.
but we would act independently of anything the neighbors would do to try and enforce the deeds in their neighborhood.
okay, yeah, the enforcement part. Would our ordinance hold weight in a covenant bound neighborhood?
Yes, because they still
Yeah.
exist in the town. It's not like they're covenant neighborhood, they become, they still get town police, they still get town fire, they still get their roads plowed by us, so yeah, the things still apply.
Just like a municipality can't violate any statutory provisions of
Right,
state.
it's well, yes, right,
It's just up one level.
another level up, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if we have any here in town, but do we have any neighborhoods that have HOAs in place?
Yes,
Winridge.
Winridge,
Carmel
oh,
Place.
Windmere.
Windmere, yes, Windmere.
Windmere?
Carmel Place.
So that
So,
would
yeah.
be interesting to see what would happen there. Certainly then that they would have some enforcement tooth
I think
that they could enforce on their own.
They couldn't worry about that very long.
Mm, yeah, so you're saying there's probably a difference between a covenant neighborhood and an HOA,
What's
No,
an
huge,
HOA?
homeowners association. They
Oh, yeah.
they own everything in there.
I understand.
We're familiar with them.
Well, you
Yeah.
have a number of HOAs, especially here in Florida, that it's individual properties, but the HOA has a lot of strength. They can impose fines and they're like a small municipality, actually, is how they are.
Yeah.
Even for properties that are individually owned. And my son lives in a neighborhood that you don't change your front door color without permission.
Right. right. So I guess if we get asked on the 11th, does this apply to HOAs? We don't know.
We don't, it just is, as Bill pointed out real well, I think that this ordinance handles
Anything.
what it needs to handle as far as registration and everything else. If the person is registering a house in a neighborhood with covenants is violating it, then the neighborhood is gonna have to address that problem,
If, so.
you know,
someone
in
that-
civil court.
someone in the neighborhood wanted to rent their house and they did it
In an
And it-
HOA or a covenant?
in the HOA. So say they rented it as an as part of an HOA. I don't think it would take long for them to figure out what was going on, but if they followed our rules, we would have nothing, we would have, be like, as far as we're concerned, you're a private residence, like, that's it. The HOA may tell the person, hey, you know, that's against our rules, and they could take their own action against it.
Yeah,
but-
there might be a little bit of a,
Right,
yeah,
but
we'll
but
battle
again,
that.
like, we would, if somebody in an HOA was not registered with us, we'd issue them a violation, and just like they would, but it'd be independent of anything
Okay.
they do, so.
yeah, okay.
In fact, I think the town of the village of Woodstock in the downtown area functions as an HOA.
They
Because
they
of,
do have there are separate regulations. The village of Woodstock and the town of Woodstock
Right, I get-
are,
right.
do have independent short-term rental regulations.
Yeah, I don't,
I got a big folder.
and with HOAs, I don't imagine there would be any conflict from them about what we're
talking
doing.
Like maybe 15 properties at this point, so like
a-
that's,
And they wouldn't disagree with the concept.
I doubt it.
Yeah,
They would think themselves immune to it.
well, that's true too.
Okay, do we want to try and come up with a definition of adverse effects or an adverse impact and occupant? That
So that's,
we wanted to, but we've all agreed we wanted to, but
we kind of punted it to the town attorney, right?
yeah, he's been dealing with other stuff, so.
But yeah, but that's why we didn't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
we thought we'd get an expert to do
I
it.
can try and get it back from him in time.
Maybe just that
Yeah,
definition.
I can maybe try to push him to get this done.
And-
I
and-
tried to write something, but I don't,
It's really, I mean,
I
it's
don't
such a
know what
simple thing, but it's really hard.
I don't know what I'm,
You end up with so many words, it doesn't make sense anymore.
well, I'll tell you what I wrote, and I'm not presenting this as a solution, but I said actions or conditions that add to or result in undesirable aspects of the community.
But then, like, well, then what does undesirable mean? Like, what does that mean to you versus means to me? Like, and it becomes, it's complicated. For such a simple term, it's complicated. So, all right, I'll try to get to Kevin tomorrow. I'll try and ask him to really, to see if he can tell him why, and be like, can you just, give us-
Can you get the whole thing done by 11th? Or if not,
well,
we
I'll
need
be like
this answer.
fourth, because I want to get it posted again to I want to get copied out to everybody, like, as soon as you can, 'cause I want to get copied out to everybody and posted again, so people have a chance to see it, so.
Yeah,
But, you know, double checking the statutory references, because we did find some that were wrong, and the ones that were wrong, I copied from other towns, so that's a problem, but not for us. So, yeah, just checking those references and seeing if there's anything else that jumps out of them, but I think largely it was okay. so.
yeah, and he has had experience with these ones,
Three.
so.
Although we're actually ahead of Killington at this point, so we're behind now, right?
Bottom.
So we actually have a draft.
Hey, we're doing great.
Yeah.
Sherman, do you mind reading that again? Your definition of an adverse effect?
that's good.
I said actions or conditions that add to or result in undesirable, which is the word.
Undesirable.
I couldn't finish
Condition, like condition or situation. Like, it's-
undesirable condition or
effects?
situation.
Three, okay.
Situations, it's
You asked me what page I was reading. My
circumstances.
Yeah. I'll pay for it.
Circumstances. Okay. All right.
Oh, one second. Having them in the wrong version.
Okay, anything else on this topic? Good discussion. Thank you for all of your input.
I don't want to prolong this any longer, but
That's okay.
anybody have any comments, questions, suggestions on the permit?
I think it looks pretty good.
So and I do, yeah, I know that, but I think people were talking about the fees, and they're talking about Rutland City, which wasn't fair, because they're not, a lot of the question, there's a lot of comments about Rutland City in there, which I thought was ironic, but, I am looking, and I do have a vendor kind of picked out to help us with purely identifying rental properties in the town. They would go through and basically once a week, scrub the 30-something websites for short-term rentals. And they give you a report that says, here's how many there are, here's how many bedrooms they have listed, all the details on it. And it's about $3,000 a year for that service. The first one I talked to was $27,000 a year. So that one's
It's a little different.
much better. Their cost would be 100% covered by the fees in the ordinance, so there is a zero cost to the taxpayer at large for the regulation that goes into this ordinance. And that was important for me to figure out that ratio of balancing that, to make sure that the taxpayers weren't having to pay to regulate something that they have nothing,
How are you so certain of that?
I don't know what.
That it would be paid for?
Well,
By the
You've got
fees?
30
That's why I played around with the numbers a little bit, but at 30, we're paying about $3,000 a year. So the 18, and maybe we can talk about if we want to change the fees, but when I found the 18, it was 55 bedrooms. And I haven't even gone to the other 12 yet to figure out how many there are, but 55 bedrooms. So that's about $5,000 in fees that we would be getting in. That would cover the vendor, plus I imagine there's to be some other things, or like probably some site visits to check things like that, that would cover any other costs that we have that goes part of that. So,
But that is assuming that the fees are gonna come in.
right, well, but that's where we hire this vendor. And right, we're gonna assume that if half of them pay, we're gonna be really close.
Okay.
So this vendor gives us that information where we can then go, and then we can start to go to the person and say, here's the ordinance, you have X number of days to bring yourself in line, or there's penalty. Anytime I go talk to someone, and I've gone out to a lot of houses, talked to people about stormwater, I've made several trips with stormwater ordinance lately, that's been interesting. But I said, listen, I am much more interested in helping make sure we are in line up front than having to do the enforcement. We will do that if we have to, but nobody likes that part of it, including me. So I would much rather have you be in line with what we want to do than having to say, here's a fine, and oh, by the way, you still need to be in line with what you're doing. So there, like, I made it very clear, like, we put enforcement in there as the stick, but it's much better to have the conversation up front and be like, let's get you in line, so that we're all on the same page, rather than have to go back.
And that's what the vendor would do.
Right.
What are the storm out water issues that have come up?
We've had some people that have called and said, hey, don't we have an ordinance about clearing trees and clearing brush? And I'm like, yep, well, my neighbor's doing this. Okay. So I've gone out and
This is in the buffer?
yeah, oh yeah, like green trees. And we didn't went out a tape measure, but they were small trees. So I'm glad they called. The person I talked to was glad that I called them and said, hey, here's why I'm calling. Can I come out and talk to you? They're like, absolutely. Told me what they were doing. All good. So
Okay.
yeah, so they've been all positive interactions, which has been very good. But people call and they have questions, and sometimes I ask them to come here, and sometimes I go out and
Yeah.
see them. But if I go out, then there's other calls. So but getting back to that is we know there's going to be a cost to regulate this. Is with an ordinance to this size, like it's and the complexity of this, there's going to be some other things that come out. The biggest one being just making sure everybody's playing by the same rules, because if neighbor A is doing all the things they're supposed to be doing and renting and they're fine, neighbor B is just renting and not paying for it, that's gonna make neighbor A a little resentful. Well, then why do I need to do it? Well, we're gonna make sure everybody's doing it. So we want to identify those. That's what that vendor's for, because it's too hard to do it otherwise.
And is that vendor also to counter any arguments like, but why are you expanding local government? Aren't you just making,
The vendor,
we're contracting everything
vendor,
out.
we are contracting the vendor to provide us a very specific information set. That's all they're doing. They aren't telling us anything other than this is the property. This is like, we're getting the details about the rental, but really not anything that's gonna, they're not making any judgments. They're just providing us information that we need to make our decision. Then what we do from there is based upon the rules that we decide on.
Right, yeah. Because
And
that's an argument we often hear.
Sure, and when I looked at the fee to be enough to cover the expenses, but not to be crazy. So I don't, did you see the fees in there, Jim? What we're talking about, the fees for this? So $100 plus $100 a bedroom. So a 4-bedroom house is $500 a year. There is one house that I found that was renting for $1,800 a night in town. So we looked at these like, it's probably not an unreasonable charge because they're making that in one day. So
That's a good,
I found out a lot of stuff.
and maybe that could be part of the presentation too. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'll get some FAQs together, and if you want me to share them around,
May 1st, because those little questions may come up.
yeah. I'll share them if you guys want. So with the next thing on the agenda is to review the summary of the draft of subdivision ordinance. We made so many changes, we thought we needed a summary of what was changed, just so we could explain it and then also put it in official postings. You know, this is what has changed. We just got a copy of that before the meeting. So I would suggest that we look at this. It's called the list of changes from the subdivision regulations. And maybe take it up on the 11th, depending on how many people are here, or it can certainly wait. There's no rush on this subdivision, right? But I would like people to spend
I'm
some,
gonna send to Kevin a copy of the original ordinance, a copy of the red line version with all the changes shown in there, a clean version, and this.
okay,
So
so he'll
original,
review it too.
fully with all the edits, one with all the edits completely in there, no changes, and this.
And probably wait to do that until we get the, the short-term rentals information back from
Yeah,
him.
yeah, no, I want that first, I need that first, yeah.
So yeah, if you want this just to read for your personal reference, or if you want to have some say on what Bill sends
Hey,
to the
hey,
town,
Bill,
we've got some time.
this, however, is not a legal document. It's a summary of,
Oh, yeah, no,
Key.
just go to Kevin, just be like, here's what we did.
yeah, but it's not exhaustive.
Well, that's also why I want to send him the 3 versions.
Okay.
So if you want to do, like.
Well, I mean, yeah, what you have on here is anything that was of substance.
Yes.
Mhm.
But I did not, every time we said select board, I
Oh,
didn't
okay.
necessarily.
Well,
highlight.
yeah, and if he wants to add all of those
That's
things,
why,
he
like at the
can,
beginning, I
Yeah.
put the revisions. That's one of the things I put in there is like changed select board,
Yeah.
select board, like.
Yep. Right.
thank you for doing that.
Yep.
I look forward to taking a look at it. Okay, so that's what we'll do for the subdivision tonight. The river corridor ordinance. We will put that pretty much on hold. I'll keep, I've got the list from Marcia of the landowners and their addresses. So we're ready to go, but let's just wait until after the short-term rentals and see how that plays out.
Different people out of this.
It'll be, it could be a different group, but let's not just be constantly barraged here. So maybe like this fall, we'll do some site visits and public meeting or two on that. Let's see, and for announcements, there is a municipal election on May 23rd. There is a select board seat on that. I forget what else. The question about the fires,
Fire station,
fire station.
select board, 2 listers, delinquent tax collector, and cemetery commissioner.
Ooh, yeah.
Race.
So right now, it's the question that will go on the ballot for the safety building,
Yeah.
the fire police building, is that the town will not exceed 5.5 million for that structure. The original amount was
Uh,
4
For just over 4.
or 2 or something
Yeah.
like that.
The architect had figured. He looked at other projects that had recently been completed, looked at their cost per square foot. And said, well, we're gonna put it up here because we think that's where the project's gonna come in, and it came in like. Way high.
Yeah.
So.
It's weird that it has to be worded that way. And because people might think, okay, geez, you want 4.2 and you want 5.5?
So,
You know,
we,
it's-
we were listening to the discussion the other night,
Yeah,
but a lot of it was, it's, the project's already approved at that cost. They're looking for approval to change the cost, not approval on the project. So,
yeah. Hopefully that'll be clear to voters.
so we're gonna have a meeting, so ballots are getting mailed out to everybody, but we're still doing we're doing a pre-vote meeting the night before at the school, so.
Yeah. Those are not usually too well attended, but the election probably won't be. But yeah, it's just weird how it has to play out like that. And that,
There was a lot of wrangling the other night about the wording on that, so.
yeah, I know. And it includes a 5% contingency,
Yeah.
which seems kind of modest, but in these days.
5% of $5.5 million is a lot.
Yeah,
It's-
yeah, it adds up.
Nice sum.
Okay.
And we are having an open house at the McKinley Fire Station on
April 29th.
Saturday, right? No, next week. A week from Saturday,
What were the hours?
10 to noon. It's just short, but, so people are wondering some of the reasons why we're asking for it. There's a picture of the police office up there, what it looks like, and then just coming to see the facility as it exists now, so,
That's in McKinley Avenue.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Too bad they can't be like in both locations. It's like, okay, here's the closet
Well,
and then,
May 13th is there's a statewide open house for fire departments. So we're participating in that also, and that is in Center Island.
yeah,
So that's a longer one. There's flyers out here and stuff for that, but that's a statewide. Open
and
house.
I also mean, having people look at the
They're-
lack
they're
of
trying-
space
they're
they,
trying to come up with because there's access requirements for the office, so they're trying to figure out how they do
Yeah.
that. So, yeah. It's tight.
and is Rooster in there too?
Occasionally, he usually, the days are nice, he's out in the car, so.
Any other news anyone wants to share? Okay, the minutes of March 30th. Norm's not here, but he gave us a couple of notes. I only remember one of them.
Move to approve the minutes of March 30th.
There's a second.
I was not here, so I don't think I should second.
Second,
Andy, you're seconding them?
yes,
Okay. Norm pointed out that I don't think we need to add it. It's about the subdivision ordinance. And And number 3, discuss creating an overview of the important changes, and he wanted Dana mentioned there, but I don't think it's,
His recollection was Dana was preparing the overview. And that old business number 2, should rental properties be changed to short-term rental properties?
what line is that?
Old business, review the ordinance, number 2. We divide it by all. We want to specify they're identifying short-term rental properties.
Some vendors are being talked to. Oh, yeah, let's do that. Number 2, instead of just all the rental properties in town, all the short-term rental properties.
Even though the topic at the top at old business says short-term rental properties. You don't think it's clear that they're talking about rental properties that are short-term?
Just so there's no confusion. Anything else that anyone sees in here?
I know that I made the suggestion that we do a one-pager. I don't know that I need to be mentioned. But that's entirely up to you, Bill. I wasn't offended that my name wasn't there.
Okay. Do we have a motion and a second? Any further discussion? Will
I'll
the
amend
person who
my-
made the motion?
Yep, I'll amend my motion to be to accept the minutes as correct or as amended.
And it's just the one change we're making, right?
Yeah, but I don't know that we need to
Um,
make that, but approve minutes as amended.
Second,
So that's, I think, Sherman's, but.
No, he.
Oh, you did second? Okay.
Abstain.
Yeah, that's right, Andy. Yep.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes as amended? Say aye.
aye,
Opposed?
And I sustain.
And no, I don't think Jim made the last meeting. You weren't here. Yeah, you're not listed yet. So, okay. Just that one change, and anything else? Okay, I'll entertain a
Move
motion.
to adjourn.
Second it.
I'll second that.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you
Thank you.
for your work tonight.